Welcome to the Exponential Edge podcast with your host, Arya Salur. I'm excited to have you join me on this journey exploring the forefront of technological advancements and innovation that will shape our future. As a senior at Acton Boxborough Regional High School and the CEO of SecArmor, a cybersecurity startup, I'm fascinated by the transformative power of technology and its parallels with business. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into key areas that are poised for exponential growth in the next decade. We'll explore realms such as cybersecurity, generative AI, sustainability and climate tech, biotech and human longevity, and the reshoring of manufacturing. We'll also go over rising startups disrupting the marketplace. These topics and businesses hold immense potential to revolutionize our world and redefine the way we live, work, and interact. Each episode will feature insightful conversations with experts, thought leaders, and visionaries who are at the forefront of these fields. In just 30 minutes, our goal is to provide you with 5 signature nuggets of wisdom from our guests. These key takeaways will empower you with knowledge and help you stay ahead in an ever-evolving technological landscape. Without further ado, let's introduce our guest for this week. Hey everyone, our guest today is Krish Kupathil, partner at Avaatar Venture Partners. Hi Krish, how's it going?
Hi, Arya. Real pleasure and thanks for having me on your show.
Of course, and this is actually a special episode because this is the start of our second season of the Exponential Edge podcast. So we've been doing it for a little bit more than a year now, actually, and it's really been a great journey for me, and really appreciate you joining us and being the first guest in our second season and the
Thank you so much.
third venture capitalist I've interviewed. So, first off, Krish, could you give us a brief overview of your career, where you're at now? And I know you studied accounting at Delhi University, but you're a venture capitalist and been working in high tech for the last few years. So I just wanted to ask you as well, how did you go from accounting to learning the basics of high tech and these new technologies?
So, very good question, Arya. And this is also, I think, for youngsters like you, a lesson or an advice. You can learn and become whatever you want, right? Some people discover their passion in life a bit later. I started with accounting. I qualified as a CPA. Worked for a year or so in United Nations and then figured out accounting is not for me. My thoughts were always on the tech side. And I'm old, so I'm talking the 80s, and immediately jumped into programming. Those are days of COBOL, BASIC, Foxbase. I don't know if you guys have even heard of those kind of.
That's way before my time.
Yeah, exactly. So way before got into that, very early in my life, along with a friend of mine, wrote a whole hotel back-end system. And this was in India. India was still catching up on computers then. And then, just out of curiosity and interest, kept going deeper and deeper into technology. And the real depth went into, along with a good friend of mine, Dr. Victor Yudaikin, who's the inventor of this technology called real-time Linux. Jumped into RT Linux, which is very technical. Of course, I was always more on the business side, but to deal with such deep technology, I had to learn quite a bit of the technology myself. And, jumped into technology, and through quite a few decades, I've dabbled in all kinds of technology, from very deep, low-level embedded systems to higher systems. And now, of course, and then as part of Mobilia, we did a lot of things very early, what are becoming mainstream now. We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that later, what's becoming mainstream. We dabbled in that. So that's been my journey. So I would say self-taught technical guy, but I've been in technology for almost 3 decades. Though my initial school training was more as an accountant. Yeah. So.
And then you've transferred from accounting to high tech, and now venture capital.
Yeah, venture
So,
capital. Yeah, the way I look at it, Arya, venture capital. I mean, I could have done other things too,
mhm.
but at this stage of my life and career, I think it's time for me to give back to the younger generation. And venture capital is one which I really enjoy. This is something which I tell all youngsters also: try everything, and then you'll figure out what is the one thing or the few things you want to do in life. Tried it, loved it, mentoring, youngsters like you. And then, of course, being apart from just giving them, what we say, gyan, or just knowledge and mentorship, uh, also being in a position to provide them capital, right? So that's the part which really drove me into the VC world. And then, of course, I got this opportunity because of, again, a good friend of mine, Mohan, who was with Motorola. And those were my days. We'll talk about that also maybe later. So yes, it's been a very interesting journey getting into the venture world and looking at a whole bunch of youngsters, advising them on what not to do in terms of the mistakes I made in my career or in my startups. The best I could do to tell them not to do. And of course, you kids are all very smart. I learn a lot when I speak to youngsters like you too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a great way of looking at it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just want to harp on something you said earlier, which was you can be anything you want to be,
You
and it
can be
doesn't really.
anything you want to be if you are passionate about it, if you have a certain sense of discipline, that yes, this is what I want to do, this is my goal, and this is how I will achieve it. Of course, there'll be ups and downs, but then, your passion drives you. And I always tell, including my own kids and all youngsters, nothing is impossible. Dream big, be passionate, it will happen. It's your persistence which pays off. Yeah.
And that idea, it's really clear to me in all the podcasts that I've done. I've seen so many leaders, CEOs, founders of huge companies, and where the work they're doing now has nothing to do with what they studied in school. So I just wanted your opinion on that, if you see any patterns and if you think that's present in these higher fields.
Absolutely. So my thought on that, Arya, when we do go to school, right, undergrad and even high school is nowadays, with internet, the amount of knowledge which is available on the net, and driven kids. I've seen people, kids who have figured out their passion early in life. They know exactly what they want to do, and they do ask questions. Why should I go to college, right? Because anyway, whatever they're teaching in an undergrad course is a bit behind what is happening in today's world, because the textbooks or the courses are always lag. They always lag behind what's happening because technology is moving so fast, right? It's not the times when we went to school where we had only paper books and we had to go to libraries and sit down and work there. But I would still recommend youngsters, if you have the time, opportunity, and the means to go to school, please do so. Because there are three things which I tell them, right? One is you build your lifelong friends and social network there. And
Yep.
social network is a massive part, or is going to be a massive part of your net worth. Let me put it that way, right? Because your contacts later in life, kids you studied with, they are in different positions. You talk to them, you learn from them, you network with them. So that's one thing which is extremely important, which you learn in that environment. The second thing, you go to a public school, public college, all kinds of things happen, all kinds of kids come there, and a whole bunch of incidents happen. We don't need to talk about them, but that teaches you how to deal with situations, right?
Yeah.
And it teaches you a lot of empathy, how to deal with people in certain situations, and also how to deal with situations. A lot of these situations are not very comfortable, and later in life, you will come across situations which are not comfortable, and that's a huge learning for you. And the third thing I tell them is, at least study enough in school to know what not to do in life, right? What is it you don't want to do? What you want to do, you'll figure out very quickly. and you'll be passionate about it. But what not to do is something you learn. So if you have the time, opportunity, and the means, I would say do it. There's nothing wrong with going through your undergrad and grad courses, right? Grad, of course, is different. By then, you would have figured out your area of specialty, and if you want to do research and other things, that's a completely different thing.
Definitely. And this podcast, the main idea is obviously technologies, industries that are going to see that major exponential growth in the next decade, in the coming decades. But then another one of the major goals of the podcast is to help high school and early college students figure out what their best return on investment is for education, where they can put their money to where they'll get the highest return on investment based on what they study and what they can do in the future. So I wanted to ask you your opinion on that aspect, the technologies, industries, and geographies that are going to see that exponential growth in the future.
So, on that one, the way, there are, there are three C's. I just try to, there are three C's which I talk about: compute, connectivity, and cloud, right? These three have come together to give us a whole bunch of technologies, whether you call it AI today, right? That's enabled because of the massive amount of compute ability which is there. And the computers are available from anywhere, cloud or, servers in-house or whatever. And the connectivity, the latency between a decision taken in the cloud and it being implemented on a device could be your laptop or could be a remote sensing device or a self-driving car. That latency has really come down, right? So based on these three, there are various areas which are now at this point of time. Then again, Arya, the speed at which technology and innovation is happening, what we are talking today may not be relevant, maybe let's say 24 months later, right?
Yeah.
So given that there are 3 or 4 areas which I tell youngsters to explore, especially youngsters who want to explore technology, right? In the area of technology. Of course, AI goes without saying. It's a huge tool which has increased productivity in all areas, whether it is the healthcare area, the molecular research, robotics, whatever it is, right? Whichever domain you're in, or whichever vertical you're in, whether it is aviation or agriculture or industry or whatever it is, right? It's a huge tool, but robotics is one which I believe is going to change the way we do things or things get done, right? And as a simple example, and when I use the term robotics, I'm using it very, loosely, in the sense that a drone is a robot for me. It's a flying robot, right? Something which is happening now, maybe next year, 2025, which is just a few days away now, 40, 50 days away. Something which I have been following very passionately is eVTOL space, the electric vertical takeoff and landing space, which is going to solve a whole lot of transportation problems for urban cities, right? So anything around that is something would be very interesting for youngsters to look at, because that is going to grow, and you have the whole world as a market there. So there's so much more to do, not only building those eVTOL vehicles, which let's say there are multiple, Toyota is building some, Boeing is building some, Mercedes, and a whole bunch of companies are building. But when these services get deployed in cities all across the country, US, and in fact all across the globe, right? I was reading the other day that Thailand, which is notorious for traffic jams, if you're in Bangkok, so they're going to start deploying that as early as Q1 next year, right? So a whole bunch of things will come up there. So robotics in that loose term, eVTOL, drones, so much of stuff to be done around drones. Then I also believe nanotech is going to be a huge game changer. New materials, the way material science and especially nanotechnology is going to impact, how things get built, or the materials, which in turn will have a massive impact on 3D printing, right? You can print a whole house, you can print metal, you can print polymers, and that's all material research, because, 3D printing means a lot has to be done around these things. So in my short, this thing I would say, because of the 3 C's, robotics, nanotechnology, especially around material science. These are two or three areas where, and of course, computer science and anything around, programming and other things. That is table stakes now. You don't even need to say that you need to learn programming. I believe programming or basic tech, I would say, is hygiene for a lawyer, for a doctor. Forget the specialist, programmers or people who are creating applications. Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you. And that's great to hear because especially drones and that EV takeoff landing space, that has been present in a good amount of my podcasts. People have mentioned that specifically. So it's good to hear that I'm on the right track with.
Yeah, robots, eVTOLs, and 3D printing slash, the material science part of it, right? I'm clubbing the two because 3D printing, apart from the 3D printing technology, it needs a whole bunch of materials which are 3D printed, right? So I'm clubbing those three. I think a lot will happen in these three areas, and youngsters going in there, depending on your passion, what exactly, and these are very broad areas. You can do so much in these areas. Like if you're going on drones, you can go on the aviation side, you can go on the battery side, you can go on the GPS side, the navigation side. There's so much, right? So many areas in each one of them. And then again, depending on your passion, just get in deep into any one of those.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so now let's talk about your current work as a VC at Avaatar. So first off, before you go into your work, I wanted to ask you if you could just give our listeners an overview of the different stages of venture capital from angel investing to Series C. And then maybe talk about Avaatar and what stage that falls into, and then what companies you guys work.
Yeah. So that'd be good. So venture funds basically if I have to generally categorize, though there is no hard definition there, but there'll be the early stage companies. I'm talking about institutions. Now there are angel investors; those are typically individuals, right?
Yep.
Who will, depending on a project, they'll put in personal money. But if you're looking at institutional funding, there'll be the early stage funds or the seed funds, which typically go in when the project is, let's say, almost on the drawing board, right? Some entrepreneur comes up with a great idea and he says, this is what it is. I've written some code, I've done some work around it, and I need some money, right? So that's one part of it. Once the project is, let's say, in a stage where he's proven the product, right? And a certain amount of, let's say, proof of concepts have been done, then typically these guys will go into a Series A, which is where, again, could be another early stage fund, not seed stage, but early stage fund. So I'll categorize seed stage funds, early stage funds, and then growth stage funds, right?
Yeah.
So early stage, again, the valuations are lower. The fund is taking a larger risk because you are still investing in the product. The proof of concepts have been done, but now you take the product, or the entrepreneur is taking the product and figuring out, based on certain assumptions he or she had, or the startup had, that is there a product market fit in the market, right? So that's the early stage fund. We come in at the growth stage once the product market fit is established, and there's no written rule as to the product market fit is done, because products keep evolving. But as a rule of thumb, what we have done as an internal measure is if your product is selling, let's say, anywhere from $6 to $10 million of business you are doing, we believe that you have found a product market fit. If you have found people to pay you that much of money every year, right, or the very first year or second year, we believe that you have a product market fit. But till then, an entrepreneur, and I have been on that side of the table multiple times, goes through various, it's a whole process. There's a lot of heartburn, and hats off to entrepreneurs who go through that, because there are so many unknowns when you're doing a product, right? The technological unknowns, the customer unknowns, and then the larger economical, at a higher level, if things change or regulations change, or one of the larger companies like Microsoft or Google comes in and makes the product which you are building, makes it into a free offering, all those risks do come
Yeah.
in, right? So we come in at the growth stage. And
Mm-hmm.
typically what we do as Avaatar, we stay with our portfolio company. Typically, we will take them all the way to an exit, right? And when we do that, and again, I'll explain a very interesting concept to you. What we do is, let's say we have a certain number of portfolio companies. Out of that, over a period of time, because typically a fund's life is 7 to 10 years. The day we invest till the time we exit. Normally it's 7 years, or it could extend up to 10 years, right? That's how long we stay invested. By then we have to exit and return money to our investors. So within that time, let's say in the first 2-3 years, we'll figure out, is the startup, and we have our internal classification there. We call it a build to last company. It is, uh, BTL we'll call it. And the logic there is, can this company and the entrepreneurs there, do they have it in them, the resilience and the passion to hit $1 billion in revenue, not valuation, revenue. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we may not stay with them till the time they hit $1 billion in revenue, but we assess whether the company, and we, in fact, a whole bunch of analysts, we write almost like it's a 200-page document we write. We share it with our LPs. And we say, okay, out of the 10 portfolio companies, I'm just making up these numbers, out of the 10, these 3 we believe are built to last. And for those companies, there is absolutely, we just open up our purses and we put extra effort helping them, go overseas, acquire new companies, hire the best people they can. We work very closely with them, right? Because we believe, okay, here, this set of entrepreneurs and this company has found a winner product, which has an impact which has an impact on the world and has the ability to create $1 billion in revenue. So, of course, in between that, the company may list. We normally exit after listing within 18 to 24 months because we also have to, rotate our money, exit from a certain portfolio, return to our LPs, and then find new entrepreneurs to support. Right. So so Avaatar is a growth stage company. And then Avaatar, typically what we do, is, we have 2 components there, Arya. We are, for a startup to get money from Avaatar, it has to be, we don't invest in B2C companies, we invest in B2B business.
Yeah.
If you are a business if you are selling to another business, we invest that. We are not very good on the B2C side. So we have restricted our focus to companies which are doing B2B. And then, of course, there has to be a technology aspect to it, right? There has to be some technology, whether it is robotics, AI, Q, or whatever it is, right? It could be any technology. We are not yet into, for example, molecular research, right? Where you're farming pharma drugs and all, but we will, right? As I'm saying, but it has to have technology. And then again, we split our money between 2 because the LPs who are supporting us, they have their objectives too, and we are, and we will talk about this later. I mean, too, we believe that, for the next 10 to 15 years, we will bet on the India story. We believe India is going to grow phenomenally, right?
Yep.
So we will support 50% of our money will go towards supporting startups, either from India or startups who are catering towards the Indian market. Because as India grows, these companies will grow, or these products, this thing will grow. So 50% of our money goes towards supporting the India story or products and on startups which are there. And the other 50% is global. We invest anywhere, including in the
That's
US
awesome.
and everywhere.
There's actually a whole chapter in my book dedicated to the rise of India globally over the next decade.
Yes. We believe the next decade and a half is India's decade, and obviously we want to be part of it. We want to fuel that, and also we want to leverage the benefits of that. And then, of course, being of Indian origin, we do have some advantage over there. Of course, India is a very open market now. We do have some advantage.
Yeah. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But first, I want to talk about your work at ZByte, which you're a co-founder of. So Zbyte,
Yes.
blockchain and Web 3.0 based company, right? And
Yes.
myself, I am not very well versed in blockchain or Web 3.0. So it'd be awesome if you, for our viewers and for myself, could go into what these two fields are
Uh
and
huh.
why they're so groundbreaking.
Yeah. So, I got fascinated by blockchain as a technology. Sometime I was a bit late. I didn't, and again, there are three or four terms, and I'll explain each one of them. There's blockchain, there's Web3, and there is crypto, right?
Mhm.
So, blockchain is the underlying technology, right? So, and what blockchain brings into, and then we'll talk about Web3 and the crypto part of it. So, what blockchain brings and what fascinated me conceptually was it brings three things, right? Blockchain brings a huge amount of decentralization. That is, today the world is becoming more and more centralized. There are these very large tech companies, right, which we trust implicitly, right? Could be
Mhm.
the Microsofts, the Googles, the Amazons, but they are centralized entities, right? Obviously, these are very noble entities. I'm a huge fan of these companies, but they are centralized and they are
Yeah.
very powerful.
Mhm.
And like any government in the world, right? A democratic government can become a dictatorship very quickly, and the dictatorship could be a benevolent one or a malevolent one for towards its people. So centralization has its pitfalls, and
Mhm.
blockchain brings in decentralization when it comes to the digital world. Right, that's what really fascinated me. Second thing is transparency. Huge amounts of anything put on a public blockchain, anybody can see it and verify it, right? We need that. In a centralized world, we will see what the central owner of that technology wants us to see. If he doesn't want us to see, he can block us. Blockchain, that's not possible. The third one is immutability. Any record, any change done on a blockchain, right, can is visible to everybody. It is immutable. If you make the change, if there is a record, it is always there. If a change is
Yeah.
made to the record, it is visible to everybody. So one thing which struck me was, okay, the world, because of the way wealth accumulation and a lot of things are happening socially, and all good, I'm not against any of those, but at some point I believe there will be a need for a technology like blockchain, which the society will demand. Now the time is not there yet. Okay. But at some point, I do believe that will come. So that's what fascinated me, and I got into blockchain. And then came the Web3 part of it. Web3 was, how do we have, because internet is still, what should I say, can still be controlled. If you look at the amount of internet traffic on all the regulations can be controlled. Blockchain, because of the inherent nature of the technology, makes it possible for users of internet to own their content.
Mhm.
Okay, so that is one aspect of Web3. Of course, Web3 is a bunch of technologies put together. There's no standard definition of Web3, but in my this thing is, if you own your content today, if you are on a certain social network, you want to move from social network A to B, you should be able to pick up all the UGC or the user generated content, because that's your content. You created it. Of course, in today's world, somebody else monetizes it. That's how it is today. But you should be able to pick up all your content and be able to move to another network because it's yours, right? So that's something which Web3 in theory should be able to do. It's evolving. It's not yet there, right? The third part, of course, is the crypto, anything on blockchain, because underneath any technology, for it to be successful, there has to be economics behind it, right? Because people, engineers, developers spend time. They have only 10, 15, 12 hours, whatever they work. They need to be socially and economically rewarded for it, right? The economical reward part of it comes through the crypto part. So a whole bunch of networks. Then, of course, there have been good and bad things which happened in this space, over the last 3, 4 years, which were the bad things. I think regulators, especially in the US, clamped down hard, which hit us also as Z-Byte, because we couldn't do a lot of things which we wanted to do. But with the change in administration, I think US is becoming way more. The new administration has already said that they will support crypto and blockchain a lot more. So I believe a lot of things around blockchain adoption in enterprises is going to kick off in a big way. So that was the idea behind ZByte. It is an open source platform, completely decentralized. A few of us founded it, created the code, and it is now, I don't know how much of it is open source now. It's supposed to be fully open sourced over a period of time. And it's happening in tranches. And at some point, what it does, it allows anybody, a Web 2 developer, with very minimal knowledge of a smart contract or other blockchain technologies to be able to create a Web 3 based application.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you so much for the overview. Mm-hmm. Now, let's go through some of your earlier work with Mobilia. Mm-hmm. And sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right. But
No, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Mobilia is perfectly fine. Yeah.
Okay. So your work there was instrumental in building a secure Android operating system. Mm-hmm. And a little bit of prior context, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll give you a little overview for our listeners. So at the time you were working at Mobilia, there was a shift from cell phones to mobile computers, right? These smartphones. And many different companies at the time were trying to become the leader or the leading operating system, such as Apple, Android, Symbian, Palm, Microsoft, etc., right? And one of the biggest problems was, for enterprises at least, and work phones, was security. And BlackBerry, correct me if I'm wrong, was the most secure operating system, and that's why enterprises use that as the primary operating system for work phones. But then other operating systems started to catch up, such as Apple, right? And Android was kind of left in the dust because the ecosystem was the least secure, right? So your work at Mobilia enabled Android to be a secure platform and be applicable to these enterprises for their work phones, right? So in your own words and your own details, could you explain your work, how you went about making Android a secure operating system and the impact of it?
Right. So, very interesting question, and and you framed it right. A lot of operating systems when the smartphones came in, right? And at that point, in fact, this was pre-Apple days. There was Symbian. There was something called Motorola had one called LJ Linux Java. We used to just call it because it was an internal system. But because they were using Linux, and Linux has a GPL license, if you're familiar with it, so they had to open source everything because any code which starts as GPL has to be open source. And then there was Symbian from Nokia, which was a closed system. So there was this big battle going around on, on which operating system wins. And in between, we got, and this was in my earlier stint with Azingo. Azingo was formed to, maintain an operating system called, anyway, so let me step back a bit. So people in the industry, Motorola, the Japanese guys, which was Panasonic, NTT Docomo, SoftBank, then Samsung, and quite a few of these entities. The organization was called LIMO, Linux in Mobile Consortium, right? A consortium was formed to create a common operating system which could leverage open source, right? Open source was becoming big those days. And unfortunately, this was like 5 elephants trying to dance, and they all toppled. It didn't work. Such huge companies, right? Huge corporations. Azingo was formed in between to be the entity which would take software frameworks from all these large companies and put together something which could be used by everybody, right? Yeah. And people could put their bells and whistles on top. Each of the mobile companies could put their bells and whistles and launch, but they would be saved. The core investment could be pooled. Unfortunately, that didn't go through. And then I started Mobilia, and we grew pretty rapidly there on the Mobilia side. And there, while doing that, and by then, Arya, Apple came, which was a game changer, right? And then Android happened, which was Google. They bought Android, and and Android, in essence, is an open source platform, right?
Yeah.
Now, Apple's big this thing was, we are secure, and they are secure. Apple is a very secure device by nature, but it is completely controlled by Apple. Android being open source, there were huge concerns on security. Hey, could Android powered devices be used in a secure way? Will people's data, how hack proof it is? And that's when two large entities in this space, I cannot take their names because of NDA, which is still valid. We bounced off ideas with them, and we proposed a way, and that time it was called SE Android, Secure Android. We proposed a way on how to make this secure. We worked with one of the largest device manufacturers, Android device manufacturers. I think you can get a hint who could that be. We worked with them to create a very secure form of Android. In fact, the engineers, the mobile engineers, their name is still on the code because they contributed it into the open source frameworks later. We worked with this, with the device manufacturer, the mobile manufacturer, who then worked with, together with Google. Google took up all these, secure Android frameworks, which was created, of course, by a whole bunch of engineers from the manufacturer and from us. And that became Secure Android, or added a lot of security to Android. And after that, of course, the big boys took over, and it's maintained, and it's very, 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 very secure. So we are very proud. In fact, I personally am very proud that we were part of an initiative which I believe has impacted lives of billions of people, right? Having a secure Android device. Because
I saw there's been about 3 billion people using Android now. And
exactly.
if the platform wasn't secure, there would be so many people unable to.
Absolutely. And compared to an Apple device and an iOS device, Android devices start, if you go to countries like Indonesia, India and all, they start as cheap as like $30, $40, so very affordable. So the digital revolution which started globally, I believe Android devices have a huge role to play there, right?
Definitely.
Because not everybody can afford $1,000 Apple device, right?
Yeah.
Across the world. I mean, US, of course, most people can, but if you look at the larger humanity, the 7 billion people on this planet, being able to make an impact there is something, makes you very happy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a great impact. Mm-hmm. And talking about your work in Azingo as well, I know it was before Mobilia. I was also interested if your work at Azingo kind of enabled you to make that Android platform more secure. And then I was also wondering why, I know Azingo was acquired by Motorola, but why did Motorola need another operating system at that time when they already had the Android operating system when they were with Google?
So, what I explained earlier, the Limo consortium, when it was set up, it was actually a McKinsey strategy. McKinsey did a whole analysis of Motorola's platform. Motorola at that time, if I remember the numbers right, was investing around humongous amounts of money, maybe $300 to $400 million in maintaining this LJ platform, as they would call it internally, Linux Java platform. And they told them, hey, anyway, the moment you launch a phone, you have to open source the whole thing. Then why don't you get the rest of your competition, whether it is Samsung, LG, those days Panasonic, and so many other guys, Hitachi, everybody used to make devices those days. The moment you open source, they will all pick it up. So why don't you form a consortium and all of you share costs, right? And Azingo was kind of the entity which was nominated by all these companies to contribute their frameworks. And then Azingo would have made the complete platform and given it to all the Limo members. Limo is Linux and Mobile Consortium, right? Now, as I mentioned, the consortium didn't take off because of differences between these companies. And since Motorola was the key sponsor of this whole initiative, right? And Azingo had by then done a lot of development around this platform. We had significantly worked on on what was originally contributed by Motorola as their LJ platform. We had done a lot of improvements to it. So it made a lot of sense for Motorola to take over Azingo because Limo wasn't going anywhere. They took it over because just to take over all the add-ons and the enhancements we had done to the platform. Yeah. And when that acquisition happened, I didn't go into Motorola as part of that acquisition. I didn't want to do that. Of course, a whole bunch of my other colleagues in Azingo went there. I stepped out, and that's when I started Mobilia. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you for the clarification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, let's shift a little bit to your predictions for the future geographies that are going to see exponential growth in the future. Right? So you've split your time in the US, Dubai, and India. And with the current political landscape, obviously the party change in the United States, and its effects on the trade war, tariffs, and possibly reshoring of manufacturing, all three of these geographies, which I've stated, are going to see some significant changes in the future. So I want to ask you what your 3 to 5 predictions for these geographies are over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. So, new administration coming in, there'll be a shift in geopolitics. It's already, we have been seeing that shift happening. And I believe, Arya, that the world's oldest democracy and the world's largest democracy will work together. That is US and India. And that relationship is going to be hugely synergistic because of the geopolitical challenges. There is a China plus one policy which every country has started just to diversify their supply chain. The world was quite dependent on China. And no, I'm not saying that world will be free of this thing. Chinese products are great. They have massive and very good supply chains. But like any prudent factory, every prudent country and government would say, I want a plus one, right? Yep. Just to make sure that I'm not disrupted completely. And one of the huge beneficiaries of that would be India, right? Yep. And India, both as a supplier and also as a market, 1.5 billion people to sell to, one of the few English-speaking countries left with this kind of a population. Of course, Europe is there, but Europe is barely 300 million. The entire European Union, and it's an aging population. India is 1.5 billion and growing, a very young population with income levels growing, right? Mm-hmm. And US, of course, the world's oldest democracy, the cradle of a lot of inventions, innovations, and technology, right? They need support to develop that further, and products which are developed need to find a market outside US. What better place than, focusing your efforts on a growing market with rising income levels. So I believe these are two markets which will be hugely complementary. They will do well. But then apart from that, I also believe that Middle East, Southeast Asia, some of these markets, they are very fast adopters of technology. They adopt technology way faster than anybody else. So a lot of new implementations of technology and new solutions which are coming up are going to be adopted there. But the scaling will happen with these products and technologies getting adopted in India and US, of course. Yeah.
Yep. Great. And then kind of shifting towards students, again, the demographic of this podcast. What advice would you give, which you haven't already, to kids entering college, and what, I know you've talked about this before, but if there's 2 areas or fields that passionate students should focus on for their undergraduate studies?
To students, I will say, go there, find out your passion as quickly as you can. And to do that, try a whole bunch of things, right? Take all kinds of courses you can and try out things which you never thought you would, academically, or even in terms of learning new skills. And those skills could be public speaking, could be, taking part in drama, music, whatever it is. Every bit helps later in social life, right? And later in your business life. I would say. So that's one. Secondly, I would say work on creating your network. These are
Mhm.
friendships you will create, which will last you your lifelong, and which will also, as I said, your network is going to be a massive part of your net worth later in life, right? And my third thing to everybody, this comes out of my personal experience. You can be whatever you want, even if you get stuck in a course which you later realize you don't like or you don't enjoy. Keep learning. You will learn new things, and finally you will figure out your passion. This I'm talking out of my personal experience. Keep learning. Learning is a process which will never end in today's world, right? If you qualified as a doctor or a lawyer or a technical expert in a certain domain, uh, you have to keep learning, right? A lot of new things will happen. So these are three things which are my recommendation to everybody. Build your network, figure out your passion, and your passions can evolve. They may change. You could have supplementary passions which come up. Keep exploring them, and then keep learning, right? Keep learning, keep studying, keep learning.
Awesome. Thank you. And that actually,
Yeah.
that's really applicable to myself as well, since, like, I'm a senior in high school and
Mm-hmm.
be in college next year. So thank you for
Right.
that. And then, uh, obviously, like I've said, I've interviewed a lot of successful leaders throughout my time doing this podcast. Um, and all of them have some mindset attributes that make them successful leaders. So I wanted to ask your opinion on maybe 4 to 5 mindset attributes uh, that make a successful leader.
There are five which I go by, and over years of experience, on myself or experimenting on myself, and also now, as a venture capitalist, seeing entrepreneurs,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I see the successful ones as the folks who have a lot of persistence, who are very resilient. Hey, things are not looking good. Let me switch off the lights, go away, try something new. No, that's not what an entrepreneur is, right? You started
Yep.
something, things go up and down. You can evolve, you can pivot, but you have to be there, right? So I've seen, so resilience is number one, I would say, right? Number two, I would say these leaders and good entrepreneurs, they're hustlers. They will figure out finding your first few customers. They will hustle a deal. Because it's a necessity for them. They'll figure out a way to do it, right? When I use the word hustle, right? Then the third thing I've seen, Arya, is among successful folks is they have no egos. If they need help, they will reach out. And have
Yep.
seen folks who have these, I don't know if the right term is ego or what. They hold back. They don't reach out and ask for help. If there are areas you figure out, and that's being intelligent. If you figure out, hey, I'm deficient in certain areas, or I need help in certain areas, reach out to folks. There are enough and more people who will step up. Go to your investors, go to your mentors, go to your advisors, reach out.
I've heard from one of the people I've interviewed and asked a similar question, that really the good leaders are the ones, or the good entrepreneurs are the ones who hire people who are better than them to make up.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll come to that, but this is, reach out if you're lost, if you feel stuck, whatever it is, right? Uh, Reach out. If you don't reach out, you will not get help. And again, we are all humans. We all have our limitations, right? If there is something which within my limitation I'm not able to solve, I should reach out to you. Hey, maybe you might have a better idea or a suggestion to solve something, right? Then fourth is something which I already said. The entrepreneurs have to be always in a learning mode, right? Because things change, technology changes, economies change, regulations change, governments change, things keep changing. You have to keep reading, keep learning within your context. That learning mode has to always happen. And the last one is what you just pointed out, right? Surround yourself with talent, and you need to have that. I have seen the good ones are able to spot that talent very quickly, and they are able to get that talent inside the organization or around them, right? So smart guys are able to figure out, okay, I need this talent. They're able to spot the talent and get that talent on board.
Mhm.
And so these are 4 or 5 things I've seen, repeatedly across domains, across verticals, among business leaders, the successful ones who have grown their companies into big, large organizations. These are 5 things which I would say, this is what I look for when I talk to, when we are evaluating a startup, whether we should put in money or not. So these are things we would look at. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And then finally, as we end our conversation today, what are your 5 key takeaways from our entire conversation today?
5 key takeaways from our entire conversation today. Great speaking to you. This was actually quite good. The questions you asked, they took me back in time, and it was good for me to, bring back a lot of those thoughts and points which you brought up. But coming back to this, 4 or 5 key takeaways for the audience and anybody who would care to listen to this would be: world is evolving very quickly. You have to continuously learn. You have to learn to evolve. Now, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're going to work in a large company, it doesn't matter. You have to personally evolve in terms of your knowledge. The earlier, the quicker you figure out what you're passionate about, the better for you. In case you have made a mistake in that, you don't have to worry. You may have trained as an accountant the way I did, but you can always get into technology. It's just a matter of studying, putting in those extra hours, and seeking help and reaching out. And my final advice to all of you guys, all the youngsters, especially guys, dream big. Don't think small, dream big. If you dream big, you will achieve big. Okay, so go with that. And especially in today's world where knowledge is so abundantly available and so much information is available, you guys have, it's only left up to you to, open up the possibilities for yourself. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. And thanks as well for our viewers for tuning in to this episode, the first episode of the second season of the Exponential Edge podcast. And tune in next episode to learn about topics, trends, and businesses that are going to see exponential adoption in the future. Thanks so much, Krish.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Arya. Great talking to you. Mm-hmm.